Fix this helicopter. I'll kiss you right now. The voice cut through the hangar like ice. Marcus Webb looked up from his mop, still dripping with dirty water. His eyes landed on the Airbus H-145 sitting under the floodlights, its engine cowling open like a wound. Victoria Stone stood 20 feet away, arms crossed, surrounded by engineers in pressed shirts and lanyards. Her gaze dropped to his oil-stained janitor uniform. "You like staring at helicopters, or are you dreaming of being a pilot?" Laughter rippled through the group. Marcus said nothing, but the next time he looked up, it wasn't to stare. It was to open the engine. Victoria Stone was born into aviation royalty. Her father built Stone Aerotech from a two-hangar operation into a powerhouse of civilian rotorcraft manufacturing. Her mother, a former flight instructor, left when Victoria was 9. She died 3 years later in a small plane crash off the coast of Maine. Victoria learned early that love was temporary, excellence was not. She graduated summa cum laude from Wharton at 22, took over operations at 28 when her father had a stroke, and by 34 had pulled the company back from bankruptcy. The press called her the Ice Queen of aviation. She never corrected them. She wore sharp blazers, carried herself like a blade, and spoke in clipped sentences that left no room for negotiation. She lived alone in a glass penthouse in Manhattan. No pets, no plants, no one waiting when she came home. She woke at 5 every morning, ran 6 miles along the Hudson, and was at her desk by 7:30. She had 3 phone numbers saved in her personal cell, her assistant, her lawyer, and her father's nurse. That was enough. She'd fired 12 executives in 6 years. None of them saw it coming. She didn't believe in warnings. She believed in results. Marcus Webb had a different kind of story. He'd been a senior aviation engineer in the Army, stationed in Iraq and Afghanistan, keeping Blackhawks and Apaches in the air under impossible conditions. He could rebuild a turbine engine in the sand with a headlamp and a prayer. His wife, Rachel, had been a nurse. They met at a VA hospital in Virginia. She was kind, quiet, the sort of person who remembered birthdays and left notes in his lunchbox. They had a daughter, Lily. But after Lily was born, Rachel slipped into a depression so deep she couldn't climb out. Marcus took leave. He tried everything: therapy, medication, long walks. But one morning, he found her in the bathtub. Lily was 7 months old. He left the military 2 weeks later. He couldn't go back to a world that demanded his focus when his daughter needed his presence. Now, 7 years later, Marcus worked the night shift as a janitor at Stone Aerotech. It paid enough to cover rent and Lily's school expenses. The hours let him drop her off in the morning and pick her up in the afternoon. No one at Stone knew he'd once sat in Pentagon briefings. No one knew he still kept his old toolkit in the trunk of his truck. To them, he was just the guy who mopped the floors. And that was fine. Lily was everything. She loved robots, coding, and asking him questions like, "Dad, can you fix anything that's broken?" He always said yes. She had Rachel's eyes and his stubbornness. Every morning, she made him promise to come home safe. Every night, he read her a story and tucked her in. She was 7 years old and believed her father could do anything. Marcus worked hard to make sure she never stopped believing that. 3 weeks before the incident, Marcus had been called to the research wing to clean up after a test flight. It was late, nearly midnight. The hangar smelled like jet fuel and burnt rubber. He pushed his cart past the helicopter, glancing up at the sleek white body, the Stone logo painted in silver along the tail. As he mopped near the control station, he noticed something. A screen hadn't been turned off. Pressure readings, hydraulics flow, temperature zones. He stopped. One of the readouts was fluctuating, small but consistent. A pressure differential in the turbine intake. It wasn't critical yet, but it would be. Soon. He'd seen this before. Mosul, a Chinook that had flown through a sandstorm. The fix was simple if you caught it early, catastrophic if you didn't. That's when he heard heels on concrete. Victoria Stone appeared from the control room, tablet in hand, her expression sharp. She saw him standing near the equipment. Too close. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" Marcus stepped back immediately. "Just cleaning, ma'am." She didn't believe him. Her gaze flicked to the screen, then back to his face. "You were looking at the data?" "No, ma'am, I was just—" Security. 2 guards appeared within 30 seconds. They escorted him out of the wing, told him to stay in the custodial areas from now on. Marcus didn't explain. He just nodded and left. Later that night, Victoria reviewed the security footage. She watched him pause at the screen, saw him lean in, his eyes moving across the data with focus. But she also saw something else. Earlier in the evening, there had been a hydraulic fluid spill. A maintenance tech had slipped. Marcus had been there. He'd helped the man to his feet, given him half his sandwich, and walked him to the medical station. Victoria watched the clip twice. She didn't know what to make of it. The man was a janitor, but he moved through the hangar like someone who understood it. She closed the file, saved it in a folder marked personnel notes. Then she forgot about it. 3 weeks passed. Marcus kept to his schedule. He mopped floors, emptied trash bins, and kept his head down. He saw Victoria occasionally crossing the facility. She never looked at him. He preferred it that way. Invisible was safe, but he still thought about that pressure reading. He'd checked the maintenance logs online. Nothing had been flagged. He thought about saying something, but who would listen to a janitor? So he kept quiet. He went home. He made breakfast for Lily. He helped her with her homework. But deep down, in the part of him that still remembered the smell of engine oil and the sound of rotor blades, he knew something was wrong with that helicopter. And he knew that eventually, someone would have to fix it. The morning of the test run, the H-145 wouldn't start. The ignition cycled, the fuel lines checked clean. The diagnostics came back normal, but the engine refused to turn over. Engineers from MIT, Caltech, and Oxford gathered around the machine like surgeons over a dying patient. They ran tests, swapped components, recalibrated systems. Nothing worked. Victoria stood in the center of the hangar, her jaw tight. This wasn't just a test flight. It was a demonstration for a potential client, a medical transport company from Seattle worth $40 million. If the helicopter didn't fly, the deal was dead. She'd built her reputation on reliability, on precision, on never missing a deadline. This couldn't happen, not today. She turned, scanning the room for answers, and that's when she saw him, Marcus Webb, mopping near the far wall. But he wasn't mopping. He was looking at the helicopter, specifically at the pressure valve housing near the turbine intake. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Victoria felt something flicker in her chest. She walked over. The engineers fell silent. She stopped 5 feet from him. "You." Marcus looked up. His face was calm, unreadable. "Yes, ma'am." She gestured to the helicopter. "You've been staring at it for 10 minutes. See something we don't?" A few of the engineers smirked. "Tell you what," she said, her voice cold and clear as glass. "Fix this helicopter and I'll kiss you right now in front of everyone." The hangar went completely silent. Marcus didn't flinch. He just looked at her, then at the helicopter, then back. "And if I can't? You're fired. No severance, no insurance, no final paycheck." She crossed her arms. "Do we have a deal?" One of the engineers spoke up. "Miss Stone, with all due respect, he's a janitor." "I'm aware of what he is." Her tone cut him off. She didn't take her eyes off Marcus. "Do we have a deal?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He thought about Lily, about the robotics competition that night, about the workshop lights that had been out for 2 weeks. Then he set down the mop. He didn't say a word. He just walked toward the H-145. The engineer stepped back. Victoria watched him go, her face unreadable. One of the younger engineers pulled out his phone and started recording. It was 11:47 a.m., what no one in that hangar, New was that Marcus Webb had spent 6 years keeping military helicopters alive in war zones where failure meant death. He'd patched bullet holes in rotor blades with sheet metal and aviation-grade epoxy. He'd rewired avionics panels by flashlight while mortars fell 100 yards away. He'd once restarted a downed Black Hawk using a car battery and jumper cables. He'd been decorated twice, commended 4 times, and he'd walked away from all of it the day he buried his wife. Now he worked nights and came home to a little girl who built robots out of cardboard boxes. Lily was 7 years old. She had Rachel's dark eyes and Marcus's stubborn chin. Every morning before school, she made him promise 3 things: come home safe, don't forget lunch, and help her with her project. She'd been working on that project for 2 months. A small autonomous rover that could navigate obstacles using sensors she'd coded herself. The regional robotics competition was tonight. The prize was a full scholarship to a summer STEM camp at Cornell. But the workshop at her school had been shut down for repairs 3 weeks ago. A wiring issue, a safety concern. Lily had been working at home under a desk lamp that flickered, with tools Marcus had bought from a hardware store. So when Victoria Stone made her offer, Marcus didn't think about the job. He didn't think about his pride. He thought about Lily, about the lights in that workshop, about the look on her face when she showed him the rover for the first time and said, "Dad, do you think I can actually win?" He'd told her yes, because that's what fathers do. Marcus stood in front of that helicopter, rolled up his sleeves, and decided that today at least one thing would go right. Marcus crouched down beside the H-145 and peered into the turbine intake. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and shone it into the intake valve. Immediately, he saw what the engineers had missed: a fine metallic dust coating the interior surfaces of the pressure regulation chamber. He'd seen it once before in Mosul, on a Chinook that had flown through a sandstorm and sucked in particulate matter so fine it bypassed all the filters. He stood up and turned to face Victoria. "It's the pressure valve. There's a blockage, metallic dust. You won't see it on the diagnostics because it's not a sensor issue. It's physical obstruction." The engineer with the Caltech ring scoffed. "Metallic dust? We ran a full system purge this morning." "Not deep enough," Marcus said calmly. "You need to pull the valve housing, clean the interior surfaces manually. If you don't, it'll cycle fine on the ground, but fail again under load within 3 days. Another engineer stepped forward. "And you know this how?" Marcus didn't answer. He just looked at Victoria. "You have until 2 p.m., she said. "If this bird flies by 2, you get your kiss and you keep your job. If it doesn't, you're gone." She checked her watch. "Clock starts now." Marcus stood alone beside the helicopter. He looked at his watch. 11:47 a.m. 2 hours and 13 minutes. He walked to the custodial office, unlocked his locker, and pulled out the duffel bag he kept hidden behind the cleaning supplies. Inside was his old tool kit, military-grade precision instruments. He'd told himself 100 times he should sell them, that he didn't need them anymore, but he'd never been able to let them go. He carried the bag back to the hangar and unzipped it. The tools gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He picked up the first tool, a ratchet wrench with a custom grip. It fit in his hand like it had never left, and for the first time in 7 years, Marcus Webb stopped pretending to be someone else. Marcus started by removing the engine cowling, 6 bolts, each requiring a specific torque sequence. He worked quickly but carefully. The engineers who'd stayed to watch exchanged glances. This wasn't the fumbling of an amateur. This was precision. Within 8 minutes, the cowling was off. He disconnected the electrical harness feeding into the pressure valve assembly. 12 connections, color-coded. He unplugged them in sequence, tagging each one. The valve housing came next. Removing it required detaching 3 hydraulic lines and a sensor array. One wrong move and he'd flood the system or break a sensor that cost $12,000 to replace. At 12:23 p.m., he lifted the valve housing free. He carried it to a workbench and opened it. The interior was coated with that fine metallic dust. He'd been right. He used a microfiber cloth and aviation-grade solvent to clean every surface, checking his work with a fiber optic camera. While the valve housing dried, he turned his attention to the compressor intake. He used a vacuum probe to extract the particulate matter, working blind, guided only by feel and experience. At 1:14 p.m., he pulled his arm out. The vacuum canister was coated with metallic dust. He'd gotten it all. He reassembled the valve housing, reconnected the hydraulic lines, reattached the sensor array. Every connection had to be perfect. Every bolt had to be torqued to spec. By 1:38 p.m., he was reconnecting the final electrical connection. He ran a manual pressure test. The needle climbed smoothly. No fluctuations, good. He closed the cowling, torqued the bolts, and stepped back. The engineers had returned. More of them now. Maybe 20 people watching. Victoria appeared at 1:50 p.m. She stood with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. Try it now. She walked to the pilot's door, climbed into the seat, and reached for the ignition. The hangar fell silent. Victoria turned the key. The starter motor whined. The turbine began to spin, then faster. The rotor blades shuddered, then began to turn. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. The H-145 lifted 6 inches off the ground, hovered there, steady and perfect, then settled back down. Victoria shut off the engine. Silence fell again, heavier this time. She climbed out of the cockpit, walked over to Marcus, and stopped 3 feet in front of him. Everyone was watching. Phones were out recording. Marcus pulled off his gloves, looked her in the eye, and said the thing no one expected. I don't need your kiss. The hangar went completely silent. I just need the lights in Lily's workshop turned back on. She has a robotics competition tonight. She's been building in the dark for 2 weeks. That's all I want. Just the lights so she can finish her project. Victoria stood perfectly still, but inside something was shifting. Who's Lily? My daughter. She's 7 years old? Marcus met her eyes. She's smarter than I'll ever be. She's building an autonomous rover with sensors she coded herself. She deserves a fair shot. That's all I'm asking for. Not money, not a promotion. Just lights. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. Shame. Real shame. The kind that made your throat close. She'd used this man, made him a spectacle. And he hadn't done it for recognition. He'd done it for a 7-year-old girl building robots in the dark. Done, she said. The lights will be on by tonight. You have my word, Marcus nodded. He didn't smile, just nodded once and turned back to gather his tools. Victoria walked away. Her heels echoed in the silence. Back in her office, Victoria closed the door and stood at the window. She felt unsteady, like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She walked to her desk and opened her computer. She typed his name into the company database. Marcus Webb, employee ID 4732, night custodian. Hired 7 years ago. She clicked on his file. Education. Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, University of Virginia. Minor in Aerospace Systems. GPA 3.9 military service. United States Army Aviation Maintenance Division. 2009-2017, rank at discharge, Warrant Officer 2. Specialty, Rotary Wing Aircraft Systems. Honorable discharge. Reason for leaving. Personal family matter. Commendations. Army Commendation Medal. 2 Meritorious Service Medals. Joint Service Achievement Medal. She stared at the screen. She clicked on his personnel photo from 7 years ago. It showed a younger version of the man she'd just humiliated. Shorter hair, clean-shaven, the same serious eyes. He was wearing a suit, the kind you wear when you're trying to start over. She closed the file, picked up her phone, and dialed the facilities manager. Turn the lights back on in the workshop at PS 114 tonight. I don't care what it costs. Get it done. Then she sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. She thought about her father, about the stroke that had nearly killed him, about the day she'd walked into the board meeting and announced she was taking over. She'd been 28 years old. She'd thought that made her strong. Now she wasn't sure. She thought about Marcus's face when he turned down the kiss. The way he'd looked at her without anger, just tired, just done. She thought about Lily, 7 years old, building robots in the dark. And she thought about herself at 7, sitting in her mother's Cessna, learning to read altimeters. Back when flying felt like magic before it became business. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Client from Seattle is asking about the test flight. Should I reschedule? Victoria typed back, "No. Tell them the demonstration is happening as planned. 3 p.m. We're good to go." She set down the phone. Somewhere down there, Marcus Webb was putting his tools back in a duffel bag. And somewhere else, a 7-year-old girl was waiting for her father to come home and tell her the lights were back on. Victoria pressed her palms against her eyes. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since her mother's funeral. But she felt something close, something raw, something that felt uncomfortably like being human. The next evening, Victoria found herself in the employee parking lot. She told herself it was routine quality control, but she knew it was a lie. She was looking for him. She found Marcus's truck in the far corner, an old Ford F-150 with a dent in the rear panel and a faded military veteran sticker on the bumper. He was underneath it, tools spread across the asphalt. She walked over. Her heels clicked on the pavement. He slid out from under the truck, saw her, and sat up. "Miss Stone, I owe you an apology." The words came out stiff. She tried again. "What I did yesterday was wrong. I used you. I made you a spectacle. I turned your skill into a joke and your dignity into a bet. That was cruel. I'm sorry." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for Lily." "I know." She paused. "Did she win?" "Second place. But she got into the summer camp. Full scholarship." He smiled, a real smile that changed his whole face. "She cried when I told her." Happy tears. Victoria felt that tightness in her chest again. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is an invitation to the company gala next month. Black tie. I'm inviting you and Lily. There's going to be a robotics exhibit. MIT is bringing some of their competition bots. I thought she might like to see them." Marcus looked at the envelope. Didn't take it. "Why?" "Because I want to apologize properly. And because your daughter sounds brilliant. She should meet people who understand what she's building." Marcus took it. The paper was heavy, expensive, embossed with the Stone Aerotech logo. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." Victoria turned to leave, then stopped. "Marcus? Yeah?" "Thank you for fixing the helicopter and for reminding me what humility looks like." She walked away before he could respond. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Lily, about a 7-year-old soldering circuits under a desk lamp. She got up at 2 in the morning, made coffee, and sat at her kitchen counter with her laptop. She pulled up the company's charitable foundation account. She authorized a $50,000 grant, new equipment for the STEM lab, a robotics program, scholarships for students who couldn't afford competition fees. She submitted it, closed the laptop, and finally, for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. 3 weeks later, Lily won first place at the regional robotics finals. Her rover navigated a complex obstacle course in under 2 minutes, faster than any other competitor. The judges called it innovative, elegant, advanced beyond her age group. Victoria attended. She sat in the back row wearing jeans and a plain sweater. No makeup, no jewelry. Just another parent in a crowd. She watched Lily's face light up when they called her name, watched Marcus lift her onto his shoulders while she held the trophy above her head, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Joy. Not the cold satisfaction of closing a deal. Real joy. Warm and uncomplicated. After the ceremony, Lily ran up to her. "Are you my dad's boss?" Victoria crouched down to her level. "Sort of. Are you his girlfriend?" Victoria froze. She looked at Marcus, who was standing a few feet away, trying very hard not to laugh. "No," she said carefully. "I'm just a friend." "Oh." Lily looked disappointed. "I thought you were pretty." Victoria's throat tightened. "Thank you, Lily. I think you're brilliant." Lily grinned, then ran back to her dad. Marcus walked over. "Sorry about that. She's been asking a lot of questions lately." "It's fine." Victoria smiled. A real smile. "She's wonderful." "Yeah, she is." Jack looked at her. "Thank you for coming." It meant a lot to both of us. I wouldn't have missed it. A week later, Victoria called Marcus into her office. She offered him a position as a senior test engineer. Full benefits, salary 3 times what he was making, a signing bonus. He turned it down. "I appreciate it. I really do. But I don't want to go back to a world where people are measured by their titles. I'm happy where I am. I get to be there for Lily. That's what matters." Victoria didn't argue. She understood. For the first time in her life, she understood that success wasn't always about climbing higher. Sometimes it was about knowing when you'd already reached the top of the mountain that mattered. But something had changed between them. He started staying a few minutes after his shift to talk. She started arriving earlier to catch him before he left. They talked about helicopters, about Lily's projects, about nothing important and everything important, and slowly, without either of them planning it, something began to grow. A month later, Victoria was scheduled to observe a test flight of the H-145, routine maintenance check before delivery to the Seattle client. She arrived at the hangar early and saw Marcus coordinating the ground crew. He wasn't wearing his janitor uniform. He was wearing a flight suit with a safety vest. She walked over. "I thought you turned down the engineering position." He looked up. "I did, but they asked me to consult on safety protocols for the test flights. Temporary contractor." I said yes. "Why?" "Because Lily asked me if I was ever going to fly again." I told her I didn't need to. She said, "But Dad, you love helicopters." She was right. He smiled. "Turns out you can't hide from 7-year-olds, Victoria laughed. A real laugh, light and genuine. After the flight, successful and flawless, she found him near the H-145. The sun was setting, casting gold and orange light across the tarmac. She walked up to him holding something in her hand. A piece of cloth. He recognized it immediately, the rag he'd used to clean his hands that day. "I kept this," she said quietly. "From the day you saved the project." Marcus looked at her. "Why?" "Because it reminded me that I'm not always right. And that sometimes the person you least expect is the one who changes everything." She stepped closer. "Do you remember what I said that day about the kiss?" "Yeah, I didn't mean it." "It was cruel. And I'm sorry." "I know." Victoria looked up at him. Her heart was beating faster than it should. "But I'd like to make a new offer." "What's that?" "I'd like the first kiss to be because I love you, not because you fixed something." Marcus's breath caught. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone who had spent her whole life building walls, someone who was finally ready to let them fall. He reached out and took her hand. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The H-145 sat behind them, silent and still. The sky above was turning purple. Marcus leaned down. Victoria rose up on her toes. And they kissed, softly, slowly. Not because of a bet, not because of a challenge, but because somewhere between the engine and the apology, between the daughter and the dream, two broken people had found a way to be whole. When they pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "Lily's going to be insufferable about this." Marcus laughed. "Yeah, she's going to say she knew all along." She probably did. They stood there as the sun disappeared and the stars came out. And for the first time in years, Victoria Stone felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not in a boardroom, not in a penthouse, but here, with him, under the sky where helicopters were born and love learned to fly.